To lose control of your life can sometimes be such a traumatic event that it will alter the course of your fate forever, as it is this trauma that can manifest itself into a hunger for that same control, enticing someone to become a person who will never lose again, no matter the cost or consequences. Though, more often than not, the power that grants them this satisfaction comes at the cost of snuffing out their past, hollowing them down to a shell of the former person they used to be. And one of the most iconic examples of this transformation is the treacherous, traumatized tactician tenaciously tightening team tensions, Masato Kusaka, also known as Kamen Rider Kaixa. Masato Kusaka is the secondary rider for Kamen Rider Faiz, and overall one of the most iconic figures throughout the whole of the Heisei generation, let alone all of Kamen Rider. He is a man who has played every side of the coin during his run in Faiz, from partner to anti-hero and straight up series antagonist for a minute. And while he is a detestable rat, he is also one of the most competent fighters and the character who manages to keep the gears moving throughout the story of Faiz. And the reasoning behind his actions throughout that same story is all centered around his trauma and desire for control. Though before we get too deeply into that, let's understand the meaning behind his name and design. Now, the name Masato Kusaka is a rather interesting one when you begin to dissect it, and it relates really strongly to his character. So let's start first with his given name of Masato, which when broken down carries with it a specific meaning. Firstly, you have the characters of Masa, which means essentially elegant, genuine, or proper. And then you have the second part of his name, which is To, which translates specifically to person. So altogether, Masato is an elegant or proper person, which plays very well with his introduction as this hard-working team captain of multiple college clubs, as well as working thematically with the persona that he puts up when he engages with people of this hard-working and kind person that anyone would want to be. Though when we reach his family name of Kusaka, then we begin to see the truth behind his elegance, as Kusaka, when broken down, is comprised of the characters for rough or roughness and to be in addition to or beneath something. So altogether, Masato Kusaka means an elegant person with a roughness beneath him, which is a perfect reflection of Kusaka's own two-faced nature, as that elegant and kind persona that he puts up is, as I said, a front to help his more manipulative and cruel side. Though the other mask which Kusaka would find himself donning just as frequently as his persona is the one generated via the Kaixa gear when he becomes Kamen Rider Kaixa. Now, Kaiza's design is based on a combination of many different things. Firstly, let's start by staying in line with one of the most common motifs found in Kamen Rider suit designs, that being it resembles a bug. In Kaiza's specific example, it is an Asian giant hornet, with the suit now having an overall yellow and black color palette, along with the helmet being the clearest example of why it's a hornet, with the mouthpiece having a decal that resembles the mouthpiece of a hornet. As well, it has two large horn-like antennae that are very similar to the antennae shape of a hornet. As well, to play along with Kaiza's sort of role as an antagonistic force in the story of Faiz, the name Hornet originates from the term one with horns, which works well with the common demon or devil motif found in a lot of rider designs. Though there is more to this, but I'll have to get into that later into the video. Though the other more predominant motif found throughout all of Kaiza's suit is the implementation of the Greek letter Chi, which can be pronounced a number of different ways, from Kai to Ki.
Ki, the most ancient letter. Some say Kai, but the meaning is the same.
But this Kai motif is reoccurring throughout almost all of the design, from the soles of the boot to the chest of the shield, and of course his main weapon, the Kaiza blade gun, which is just one of the many tools that Kaiza has at his disposal, though this is the only weapon made by Smart Brain that isn't disguised as an everyday tool, though it is still a weapon with multiple features. Firstly, the most prominent being Gun Mode, which fires out a burst of plasma-based blasts that originate from the same energy source as the Kaiza suit as a whole, this being Photon Blood, which is a special type of blood-like energy that can disintegrate almost anything that it touches. He can also use this weapon in an akimbo style with his Kaiza phone if he switches it into Phone Blaster mode. Speaking of the Kaiza phone, it is the main storage unit for the Kaiza mission memory, with it being stylized after a swivel cell phone and working like a cell phone as well. Now, this chip can be slotted into the top of the phone and is vital for the activation of the Kaiza driver, as it generates the Kaiza suit. This memory chip can also be used to engage into Exceed charges, which are finishing moves that see him inserting the chip into other smart brain-like gadgets, like the Kaiza Shot, which is a camera tool that, when the memory is inserted over the lens, turns this digital camera into a devastating knuckle duster that Kaiza can use to perform the Kaiza Grand Impact. Then, of course, you have the combination with the digital binoculars called the Kaiza Pointer, which, when equipped to Kaiza's leg, can fire out twin energy drills which allow Kaiza to perform a Golden Smash, which, similar to how the Kaiza Pointer shoots out two drills, Kaiza's Rider Kick is a double-legged drop kick. Though if you were to insert the Kaiza memory into the blade gun, you would unlock its true potential, transforming the weapon into its Photon Edge blade form, which is almost held primarily with a reverse grip, though if an Exceed charge is initiated, it begins its finishing move of the Kaiza Slash, where Kaiza fires out a plasma net that paralyzes anyone hit by the attack, and then dash forward through his target at an extreme speed. And like all other Exceed finishers, this leaves behind a big Kai symbol on the defeated enemy before they dissolve to dust. Now, those attuned to the Kaiza gear also gain command over the transforming support mech vehicle, the Side Basher, which is a motorcycle sidecar combination which appears to be a modified Honda CB1300. Now, the sidecar of the Side Basher allows for cooperative rider attacks and is likely where it gets its name from. As well, the bike comes pre-programmed with a rudimentary AI, which causes it to assist those attuned to the Kaiza gear when they are needed. It can also be transformed into a battle mode, which is a bipedal war mech where the sidecar becomes two legs and the arms are the modified exhaust ports. This can provide covering fire as well as overwhelm its target with assault missiles. Now, the design of this battle mode seems to have taken direct influence from Ed 209 from the movie RoboCop. Now, I've said the name Kaiza quite a few times already, but even the name of this rider has a purpose in the story and is directly connected to Kusaka, with the meaning behind this name being comprised of multiple pieces. Firstly, you have Kaiza's name requiring a Gorowase-style activation code, which is of course 913, which can be read as Kai-Isa, though the reasons that these numbers were even selected is so that they can work with the previously mentioned Greek character of Kai, which is a letter with a history that plays very well with Kusaka's character, but I'll get more into that later in the video as well. Though the name Kaiza also is likely in reference to the Greek word Kaiser, or Emperor, which can be pronounced very similar to Kaiza in Japanese, with even some translations referring to Kaiza as Kamen Rider Kaiser, though it is officially Kaiza. And it's this type of name that plays very beautifully with Kusaka's key motivation throughout the story of Faiz, his desire for control, as Kusaka is someone whose life has been nothing but a series of unfortunate events right after another, as during his childhood he used to be extremely close with his mother, so after she died to a freak accident, he was not only orphaned, but lost spiritually in the world. Feeling weak and helpless, he was eventually adopted alongside other children by the former president of Smart Brain, Hanagata, in search for the right vessel for the Orphanot King. Though Hanagata, wanting more for his children, created them a new home, called the Ryusei School, though this wasn't a place of comfort for Kusaka, as due to his meek nature, he was often bullied or pushed around by the other children. All except for Mari Tsunada. She was someone who often protected Kusaka and eventually became a key source of comfort in his life, causing him to develop a complex that drove him to become stronger in the future in order to protect her in a similar fashion, with the hopes being that in doing so, she would continue to be a major source of comfort in his life. In a Freudian sense, Kusaka saw Mari as both a caretaker and a lover, saying so almost directly later on. Though these ideas would shatter years later during a reunion between the students where they were attacked by one of their own who turned out to be the Sloth Orphanok. As well, Following close behind is a soon-to-be Lucky Clover member, Kitazaki, the Dragon Orphanaut, and these two would directly lead to the death of every member of the Ryusui school, including Mari. Though the injuries that Masato received during this time weren't initially fatal, as he revived soon enough to find Mari's body, and in an attempt to wake her, he sees her blood stain his palm. A traumatic sight that resembles the death of not only his mother, but puts into perspective just how helplessly weak he still is. And it's after this attack that all the students' bodies were gathered and brought to a smart brain laboratory where they were injected with experimental Orphanoc primers, which was likely some sort of mixture of photon blood. And these experiments were conducted out of the hope of creating artificial Orphanocs. This process also involved totally wiping the memory of the students that night. Though Kusaka's body seemed very receptive to the injections, adapting to it like a natural process, allowing him to not only revive with the memories of the attack fresh on his mind, but he was also able to wield the Kaiza belt without dissolving himself, which is my main reason for why I believe photon blood was injected into the kids that night, as it's the main energy source for the drivers, and is seemingly a naturally produced substance of Orphanocs. So with this being injected into Kusaka, it explains why he's able to not only utilize the Kaiza driver, but also why he can use the Faiz and Delta driver. Though now that I've discussed his revival, I can also discuss his final connection to Kai. As those familiar with the Greek alphabet and its usage know that Kai is often associated with Christ, his crucifixion, and his resurrection. As well, there are quite a few aspects of Kusaka's character that resembles that of Christ's story, from a strong connection to his mother, a betrayal and death caused by a former trusted associate, and experiencing that of a resurrection. And biblical inspiration isn't too unheard of in Faiz's writing, as Faiz seeks to connect elements of Greek iconography with religious text more often than you might think, such as even the word Orphanoc, which is a combination of the mythological figure Orpheus and the biblical character Enoch, which are both connected to stories which have ideas about escaping death in some regards. With Orpheus using his power of song to outwit the gods to reclaim the soul of his lost lover Eurydice, and Enoch being a man who never knew death but instead was ascended into heaven via God, these elements of power and ascension are key components in the Orphanoc's inherent feelings of superiority, though I feel the story of Orpheus is directly applicable to Kusaka's character as well, as not only is the character of Orpheus connected directly to the story of the Golden Fleece, a symbol of authority and kingmanship, and could be one of the reasons why Kaiza is a gold and yellow and has a finishing move named the Yellow Smash, but also the story of Orpheus and Eurydice, as it speaks of a man who saw the love of his life taken before her time, who journeyed to the underworld in order to bring her back, but was given one order, that when he leaves the underworld, he must not look back, otherwise his beloved would be gone forever. This is used in a narrative sense to relate to Kusaka being the only one of the Ryusui students that remembers the attack from the reunion night, as he not only remembers the death of all of his friends, but more specifically, the death of his beloved Mari. Yet, if he could forget it all, he would. He doesn't want to look back at that night. He doesn't want to remember that he saw her die. And the more he does remember this tragedy, the further he drifts away from Mari in the main story of Faiz, making Kusaka's tragedy a twist on the writing of Orpheus. Though, it should be noted that while he is much like Orpheus, Kusaka is not an Orphanoc, as even with all the experimentations done on the Ryusui students, only one of them ever successfully became an Orphanoc, that being Aki Sawada. Though, the reason that Kusaka might have been able to cling on to his humanity and adapt to the injections is due in part to his dreams of being Mari's protector, finding his father, and ensuring a situation like that reunion night would never happen again. And this theory of using his dreams to maintain his humanity is all but confirmed by his father when he explains that he had raised his students to not be tempted by the power of Orphanocs, to fight with their dreams for a better world fueled by them. And this is why Hanagata worked tirelessly to produce belts and upgrades for his students. He believed that they could win the battle for the future, and because of this element of the story, Toshiki Inoue, the writer of Faiz, Faiz creates a scenario where Kusaka more so embodies the main motifs of a main rider than Faiz's actual lead, Takumi, as Masato or Kaixa is someone who is not only created by the enemy faction, and more specifically his father, and was bestowed with the power of the enemy, that was of course originally created to just be a tool of that faction, and much like most other riders, Kusaka would eventually break free from this and become his own person, fighting for the future that he directly believes in. Though, due to the damage caused by that night, Kusaka would wish for the total elimination of all Orthodox, believing that no matter how human they may seem on the surface, they all become monsters eventually. And to achieve this goal, he would need to hone himself for the future war to come. And following the events of that school reunion, if ever asked about it, Kusaka would deny ever even attending, which leads to some confusion, as he, like everyone who attended it, signed a postcard denoting their appearance at the reunion. As well, he also began to train his mind and body to become an expert at sports, horseback riding, and of course, fencing, which helped develop him into a solid fighter, though he is often depicted as a more defensive or riposte-heavy combatant, often parrying attacks at close-range combat. Though a noticeable trait of Kusaka following the events of that night is the routine cleaning of his hands with hand wipes, and this trait at first seemingly paints him as a sort of above-it-all type of person, someone of an elegant standing who prefers to clean their hands after performing a task that was lower than them. But in reality, this physical quirk of his is actually revealed to be a PTSD-driven response to the haunting realization and reminder that after everything he does, that those he cared about most are all now essentially walking corpses. It is him, in a way, suffering survivor's guilt, trying to cope with the fact that he is the only one who survived that night, and the blood of his beloved Mari is permanently stained on his hands for being too weak to defend her. Though, over the years, Kusaka got very good at burying this trauma under responsibility, using everything to distract or empower him, because as long as Kusaka has something to do or a position of power to fall back on, he doesn't have to think about that night, which is why he is always so desperate to keep whatever level of control he has at any given time, and will defend that control by any means necessary, even being willing to take extreme actions in order to eliminate anyone who challenges his position. This is the real origin of his ego. And over time, Kusaka came to truly believe that he can do anything he set his mind to, with even the alternate timeline version of himself in Paradise Lost believing that he is equivalent to multiple people. Though, it might be better to say that he feels like he must do everything on his own, because without him, those he cares about might die again. And it is a mindset like this that gives Kusaka the title of anti-hero. Well, that and his ruthless nature combined with his willingness to torture for information. And while his actions may be cruel, they also allow Kusaka to remain one step ahead of everyone else when it comes to the information arms race. As not only is he the first person to discover Kiba's identity, but he's also the person actually making moves on Smart Brain. And this is because Kusaka can play all the cards he wants at any given time. And this allows him to formulate schemes like no other villain in his story. He is even willing to join Lucky Clover to try to eliminate both Kiba and Smart Brain from within, or even work to destroy a newly blossoming friendship between Takumi and Kiba, the two men that Mari is seen showing some sort of affection towards, out of the hope that they may end up destroying each other. He even chooses to go out of his way to try to kill Takumi on his own in an attempt to cleanse him and Mari of their cursed fate. Which, speaking of his ego, during some of Kusaka's more emotional fight scenes, one of Faiz's main insert songs, Ego Eyes Glaze Over, will often play, which, while not exclusively a Kusaka insert song, does fit him rather well, with his Orphanok hatred and ego causing him to lose focus on things that truly matter in his life, like Mari's happiness. Though Kaixa does have an official insert theme, it's just never used in the show, this being Existence Kaizenai's Dice, which is a very solid listen and I highly recommend it. It actually kind of sounds like the opening to an SMT boss. Now, Kusaka is willing to do anything if it means furthering his goals of protecting Mari or killing the Orphanox, which this hatred would only be reinforced as the story continued, as the life of Mari would once again be taken by the actions of an Orphanox that people had grown to trust, this being Aki Sawada, one of the people who was closest to Mari before becoming an Orphanox, and used that emotional connection to lure her in. And it's this moment that truly begins Kusaka's breaking point, as following Mari's death, Kusaka is able to obtain all the power in the world that he could have wanted, being given not only the Kaiza driver, but the Delta and Faiz driver as well. Though he was planning to initially hand these belts over to Smartbrain in hopes that they might revive Mari, his life of weakness before this makes him unable to part with these newfound powers, especially to someone he couldn't fully trust. And this grows an inner hatred inside of him, cursing the power that he was now given, because it comes at the cost of a world without Mari. Though, after she is revived again, due no less by the hands of an Orphanox who was willing to make a sacrifice that Kusaka couldn't, this left him frustrated. Not only that, but Mari would continue to trust and hope for a life of harmony with other Orphanox, and even continued to love the two closest to her, which only fanned the flames of Kusaka's Orphanox hatred, as it's this same trust that got her killed twice before this, and all the while he is left cold, as Mari never considered his feelings for her. And the longer things drag out, the more his silver tongue begins to fall on deaf ears, as the people around him slowly become aware of his failings, and his hold over them breaks. Kusaka slowly begins to break down himself, resulting in some of the best acting I've seen from Kohei Murakami, as he is able to get across a character who is supposed to be hateable, but also comes packed with so much emotional trauma that on rewatches, you sort of begin to feel bad for him. Like episode 34 on the highway during his struggle to trust an Orphanox and give up the power that he worked so hard for, or episode 37 where he begins freaking out about truly being alone in his suffering, and Mari, the only source of his comfort, has rejected him once again. And in this panic, he turns towards the last physical effigy of that horrible night, the postcard that everyone had signed, including him. And then he begins to cut his name out of it. Using a box cutter, he viciously tears at it, so desperate to remove himself from that night in any way that he can. Kusaka becomes so emotionally broken by this point in the story that his facade, alongside the dreams that kept fueling his passion, dissolve. As not only could he not prevent Mari from dying again, but Mari clearly loves someone else, leaving Kusaka a man without a dream, but instead a single grasp on life: kill all Orphanox. And now his body, likely due to his loss of dreams, now begins to cease its production of photon blood, and with that, his ability to transform weakens as well, causing Kusaka to begin suffering from severe headaches, eventually this causing him to collapse. And it is from here that Kusaka would reach his lowest possible point, as after he was rescued by his father, he is told that his body is now no more different than a regular person, and if he were to ever transform again, he would die. This eliminates the last possible thing that Kusaka had. He no longer can fight Orphanox. He can no longer be Kaiza. But eventually, Mari would end up getting captured yet again as punishment for Kusaka swearing that he would kill the Orphanox King, which in turn forced his hand to have one final standoff against the remaining Lucky Clover members. This included the Orphanox that originally killed Mari all those years ago. And while Kusaka put up a valiant fight, his body would soon begin to break down, leaving him helpless to an onslaught of attacks. He was soon forced to detransform, and while he laid there, wasting away, he sees Mari desperately looking for him. He reaches out for her one last time, in a somewhat mindless desire to feel the comfort of her embrace, when Kiba, now donning the Kaiza gear himself, picks Kusaka's dissolving body up and breaks his neck. And the use of the Kaiza suit to do this, I believe, symbolizes Kusaka's own self-destructive character, as he was killed literally by a suit that is often used to represent him and him alone. As well, interestingly enough, this fate was partly foreshadowed earlier in the story, specifically by Takumi during Kusaka's introduction episode, where he warns Kusaka to be careful or he might end up getting kicked by a horse and die. Masato Kusaka is a phenomenal character who embodies the best elements of Toshiki Inoue's writing, as when you watch Faiz for the first time, he becomes this easy-to-hate bastard of a character. His personal interests are always at total conflict with the rest of the cast, and he uses his persona as this altruistic hero to constantly stoke the fire between characters or destroy possible coexistences with Orphanox. As well, his bigoted hatred of Orphanox may come off as overly exaggerated at times due to us sharing a perspective with other characters, more specifically, other nicer Orphanox, which makes Kaiza appear to be mentally emulating the actual main antagonists of Faiz. Though, when you look past the elements of dramatic irony at his character, especially during rewatches, and factor in the things that only Kaiza could know or have witnessed, you begin to see where his ego and personal biases come from. Also, the way he was designed and written throughout the story is thanks to Toshiki Inoue's approach to developing a story that challenges the ideals of heroics, as he believes that the narrative should be moved through trauma and drama, as oftentimes he will create main casts of protagonists who are diametrically opposite ideal-wise instead of making a villain to play that role, as it is when protagonists clash that reinforce the main message of a story. And Masato is clearly designed to be the antithesis to Takumi, especially in regards to Faiz's overall themes of the importance of dreams, as Takumi begins the story without a dream, casually drifting through life and avoiding connections out of fear of possibly betraying others. And it's due to this lifestyle that he has become a person of self-reliance and doesn't bother himself with the opinions of others, appearing to even be actively hostile on the outside. Whereas Masato is of course the exact opposite of this, a person who dreams bigger than they can reach and is constantly striving to achieve his goals. As well, he is bettering himself every day to ensure that he might be able to achieve his dreams, even building fake personas to lure in people so that they can begin to grow to rely on him. He cares a whole lot about what people think of him, and he is very much reliant on others, though this dream of him is twisted into a toxic mindset, one which causes pain to him when it breaks, as just as Kiba says, dreams are like curses. They are as beautiful as they are toxic, because when a man has their dream ripped away from them, they can never truly return to the person they used to be. And it is this element of their characters that is a dynamic that is even focused on in the Showa vs. Heisei Kamen Rider Tensei movie, as, albeit in a non-canon scene, Takumi not only witnesses Kusaka's final moments, but gets to hear his final words, which is desperately questioning why he should die when Takumi, a hollow person with no dreams, gets to live. Because the concept of living a dreamless existence is utterly rejected by Faiz. It believes that a person needs a dream to continue, and it's why, even though Masato Kusaka truly died the night of the Ryusui school attack, he lived on in the form of his dreams, which, like sand in an hourglass, began to slowly run out. And with the less time he had, the more ruthless he became. And with every obstacle in his path and every death he couldn't prevent, it chipped away at him piece by piece until there was nothing left but a hollow husk with no reason to live. And a man without a dream is merely dust in the wind. Now, I must say that Masato Kusaka's character, and Kaiza as a whole, wouldn't have half the appeal they have now if not for the combined talent of Kohei Murakami and Makoto Ito, who both bring a wonderfully sinister energy to their combined performance. Ito being able to capture Masato's own above-it-all mentality in his fights, with one of the physical quirks of the Kaiza suit being to adjust your collar after he transforms, which reminds me a lot of a businessman loosening his necktie, and shows that Masato is allowing himself to cut loose at this moment so that he can fight with his full potential. Also, interestingly enough, this wouldn't be the only rider that Ito would play based on a B, though Kaiza is definitely a more beloved one. As well, Murakami has become iconic for his role, especially his smile, making it almost a trademark expression of his work. Though, interestingly enough, he didn't want to be a part of a Transforming Hero series right away. He actually started out his acting career in the late 90s and worked in a lot of dramas beforehand, at least up until 2001, where Murakami became interested in working on Kamen Rider after catching the performance of Takushi Hachino on Kamen Rider Ryuki, viewing the actor's portrayal of Asakura, or Kamen Rider Oja, as so alluring that he needed to play a character similar. He wanted Kusaka to rival the energy of Oja, and even hoped that one day him and Hajino could co-star on a project. And looking back at things now, Murakami considers his time on Faiz to be some of his most precious memories, even reuniting with the cast once or twice every year, and acting as sort of a big brother on set during the show's run. He even takes the fanbase's hostile feelings towards the character of Kusaka as a badge of honor, meaning that he was able to accomplish his goal in his performance. Murakami even went on to declare that September 13th would forever be known as Kaiza Day, based of course off the activation code 913. And since then, on Kaiza Day every so often, Murakami would announce a series of different things. From a Kaiza-focused manga, to Murakami reprising his role as Kaiza in Battle Ride War Genesis, or even his Crayfish song. As well, it is his work on Rider that introduced Murakami to Toshiki Inoue, and the two have become fast friends ever since, celebrating their partnership every few years, on Kaiza Day of course. As well, Inoue would often bring Murakami onto the project that he's working on, be it Cutie Honey or Dawn Brothers. As well, Murakami has stated before in the past that he's always happy to reprise his role as Kaiza or Kusaka, in anything and everything, as much like the whole cast of Faiz, he loves the series with all his heart. And it's this passion and love for it that mixed together perfectly with the performance of Murakami that has gone on to cement Masato Kusaka in Kamen Rider Kaixa as one of the greatest characters in all of Kamen Rider. So much so that he has even returned in a handful of ways, be it the time-traveling shenanigans of Gio, or the alternate ending movies like Lost Paradise, and even Kamen Rider Faiz Deformed Flowers. Yeah, maybe not that one. Kaiza, or Kusaka, is an undeniable icon of Rider media, and hopefully they find a good place for him in the upcoming movie, Kamen Rider Faiz, Paradise Regained. But until then, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more videos like in the future, I have a Patreon at patreon.com/MediNotTheBadGuy. Every little bit helps keep this channel flowing as smoothly as it does. And if you want to find my activation code, well, you can do so by buying a copy of Shimonetta, A Boring World Where the Concept of Dirty Jokes Doesn't Exist at BuyShimonetta.com.